At Thanksgiving, my sister stood up, tapped her glass, and announced like she was accepting an award. Mom and Dad are signing the house to me. Emily gets nothing. The room erupted cheers, whistles. Someone even yelled, "About time I didn't clap." I didn't blink. I just smiled the way you smile when a storm hits, but you already know the roof is theirs, not yours. I set my fork down. "Dad," I said softly, "should I tell them, or will you?" His face drained. My sister froze. And in that moment, everyone knew something was coming. Before I take you into what happened after that silence, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? It helps to know there are people out there who've lived through families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan, and if you'd met my family before that Thanksgiving, you might have thought we were close. The kind of Midwestern picture people post on holiday cards, matching sweaters, smiling in front of a tree, pretending we never raised our voices. But families like mine don't break in loud, obvious ways. They crack in silence, in small choices, in who gets listened to and who gets ignored. And for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the quiet space where people only notice you when they need something. Jenna, my younger sister, never knew that space. She was the favorite, bright, loud, full of charm, the kind of girl relatives fawn over at gatherings, calling her a natural and a spark. I didn't hate her for it. I just learned early that I'd have to build my life on my own because nothing was ever going to be handed to me the way it was handed to her. Growing up, I watched my parents pour attention into Jenna like she was a plant that needed constant watering. Dance classes, summer camps, private lessons, things I was told we couldn't afford when I asked. Later, when I moved to Chicago for work, they called it selfish, like choosing independence meant I was abandoning them. Meanwhile, Jenna stayed close, visiting every weekend, sliding into that perfect little mold they'd carved out for her. Still, I kept coming home for holidays. For my grandmother, mostly. Evelyn Nolan, sharp mind, silver hair, the only person in the family who looked at me with real pride. When she hugged me at the door, it didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like being seen. She'd tap my cheek, whisper something like, "You're stronger than they think," then slip back into her chair, like she hadn't just given me enough fuel to last another year. This Thanksgiving felt strange before it even began. The air in the house was different. Thick, expectant, like everyone had been let in on a secret I wasn't meant to hear. Mom was darting around the kitchen with that tight smile she wears when she's hiding something. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes for more than a second. Jenna kept brushing lint off her dress, even though it was perfectly clean. And when I walked into the dining room, I noticed one more thing. An empty chair next to mine was missing. Not moved, not pushed aside, gone. I should have known then. You'd think the empty chair would have been enough of a warning, but in my family, the signs are always quiet before they explode. I sat down anyway, smoothing my napkin across my lap, pretending not to notice the way conversations dipped every time I entered the room. They'd go flat for a second like someone had pressed mute, then pick up again with forced laughter the moment I passed. Jenna floated around like the star of her own parade, checking the table settings, fixing angles on the centerpiece, whispering little asides to Mom that made them both smile. Every so often, she'd look at me with a tight-lipped grin, polite but hollow, like I was a coworker she barely tolerated. It wasn't always like this. For a long time, Jenna and I were just two kids, sharing a bedroom, passing notes under the door when we were supposed to be asleep. She used to braid my hair, steal my sweaters, beg me to drive her everywhere once I got my license. But somewhere between high school and adulthood, something shifted. She slipped comfortably into the role my parents built for her golden girl perfect daughter, while I slipped quietly out of the frame. The house situation started 6 months earlier, long before the announcement at Thanksgiving. It was a humid Saturday in June when Mom called asking me to come home for something important. No details, no warning. When I arrived, they ushered me straight to the dining table, the same table where everything would later fall apart. Dad had a folder laid out like a presentation. Mom smiled too hard, like her face hurt from stretching. "Sweetheart." Dad began, "We're refinancing the house. Just a simple signature. Better rates. You won't have to worry about anything." Even then, something in me tensed. My family never asked me for help unless they needed more than they were willing to admit. I flipped through the papers, heart thrumming as I tried to make sense of the numbers. Something felt off, too many pages, too many amounts blacked out, too many rushed explanations. "Can I take these with me?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "My lawyer can look at them." The silence that followed told me everything. Mom's smile faltered. Dad snapped the folder shut too quickly, like he regretted putting it in front of me in the first place. "It's just a formality," he insisted. "Why complicate things?" But I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer flipped through the papers, eyebrows rising higher with each page. She didn't smile. She didn't stall. She called me the next morning. "This isn't a refinance," she said. "It's a transfer of liability. If you sign, you're responsible for their debt." Debt? I'd stared at the phone numb. What debt? She explained slowly, carefully, a second mortgage, months of missed payments, foreclosure letters, things I didn't even know existed. And the moment I understood, something inside me locked into place. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something steady. 2 months later, Dad called again, this time asking for money. Not a loan, not help, money. He said it was for Mom's medical bills, but when I offered to pay the hospital directly, he crumbled. The story shifted. The truth leaked out, late payments, deadlines, desperation. And now sitting at that Thanksgiving table, watching Jenna glow under everyone's attention, the weight of those 2 months pressed against my ribs. They weren't giving her the house. They were giving her the debt, and they expected me to sit quietly beside her while it happened. By the time November rolled around, the secret sat between my parents and me like a live wire. We did not talk about the papers I refused to sign or the call where Dad admitted the truth. Our conversations shrank into weather updates and questions about work, as if small talk could cover a crater. They did not know I had done more than refuse. I pulled the property records myself. I knew about the second mortgage, the interest eating them alive, the foreclosure clock already ticking. They were drowning and trying to drag someone else under with them. At first, I thought that someone was always meant to be me. I was the one with the stable job in Chicago, no kids the person they saw as a safety net they were entitled to. Saying no to them was like learning a new language that tasted like guilt. Then Jenna started posting hints online, captions about big changes, photos on the front porch with our parents, jokes about being ready to be a homeowner. Every post felt like another piece snapping into place. A week before Thanksgiving, Mom called to gush about how excited Jenna was to host more often once things were settled with the house. She said it lightly, as if the house were a gentle heirloom, not a bomb they were wrapping in a bow. That was the night I stopped hoping they would fix it on their own. I went to my desk, pulled out a folder, and started filling it. Copies of payments overdue, notices the summary pages that showed exactly how deep they were. I did not plan to humiliate them. I planned to make sure no one could say they did not know what they were walking into. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove back with that folder in my bag and a knot in my stomach. Part of me still wanted to believe they would pull me aside, admit the plan had gone too far. Instead, Mom met me at the door with a tight hug that smelled like perfume and strain. "You look beautiful," she said. "Jenna is going to be so happy you're here." The way she said Jenna, not "we told me everything." Inside, the dining room was set, extra leaves in the table glasses shining, every chair filled but mine. My grandmother caught my eye from her usual spot and gave me a small nod like she knew more than she was saying. As I slid into my place, my hand brushed the edge of my bag. Paper against canvas. Proof against denial. If they were turning this dinner into a performance, I was done playing the quiet extra. When my sister rose from her seat and tapped her glass, I already knew I was about to watch the curtain lift on a performance they'd rehearsed without me. Jenna stood there, glowing, her hair curled perfectly, the necklace our grandmother gave her, catching the light like it had been chosen specifically for the moment she was about to steal. "Mom and Dad are signing the house to me," she announced, her voice bright enough to carry across every plate and every glass. "Emily gets nothing." The room erupted before the meaning had even finished sinking in. Cheers, loud claps, a few whistles, and the kind of laughter people use when they think they're supporting something good. Someone actually slapped Dad on the back. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye like she was witnessing an engagement. I didn't touch my glass. I didn't even blink. I just looked at Jenna and smiled. Not wide, not warm. The kind of smile that holds the weight of everything you aren't saying yet. Then I lowered my fork onto my plate and asked Dad, should I tell them? Or will you? The effect was instant. It was like my words cut a wire. The room dropped into silence so heavy I could hear the radiator tick. Dad's hand slipped. His fork hit the plate with a metallic clatter that echoed. Jenna's expression pinched. Tell us what... Around us relatives leaned forward, scenting drama. My grandmother exhaled sharply, as if she'd been waiting for anyone to stop pretending everything was fine. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it in front of me. I didn't open it yet. I just let it sit there, resting like a quiet threat. Before you celebrate Jenna getting the house, I said calmly, you should probably know the condition it's in. Dad tried to recover. Emily not here. Why not, I asked. You weren't embarrassed when you decided to sign it over to her without telling her about the debt. Heads turned. Conversations died. Jenna stiffened like someone had pulled a string tight inside her. What debt, she snapped. I finally opened the folder. A stack of payments bills and overdue notices stared up at us. I slid one page forward, the summary line in bold. They're behind on payments, I said, on 2 mortgages. The second one was taken out without telling anyone. They're months from foreclosure, maybe weeks. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Dad reddened. Jenna blinked like she'd been slapped. That's not true, she said, her voice rising. They would have told me. Did they tell you, I asked, eyes steady on hers, that the house comes with over $100,000 in debt? That if you sign those papers, you're responsible for every overdue payment and every penalty? Something cracked in her expression. Doubt crept in. Dad tried again. You're making this sound worse than it is, Emily. We're handling it. Are you? I held up another page. Because this one says the bank isn't convinced you're handling anything. He lunged forward as if he could snatch the paper out of my hand right there in front of 20 witnesses. I pulled it back before he could touch it. Stop, Mom begged. Please, don't do this today. Why not, I asked. You chose today. The relatives started shifting in their chairs, some uncomfortable, some newly curious, a few openly furious at being included in this spectacle they hadn't been prepared for. My Aunt Diane was the first to speak. Daniel, she said sharply, is this true? Dad didn't answer. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might crack. Mom buried her face in her napkin. Jenna looked between them and me. But they said the house was mine. It was never a gift, I said softly. It was an escape route for them. They needed someone to carry the debt. First they tried to trick me. When that didn't work, they chose you. Jenna stood frozen in her sequined dress, shaking. Her fiancé Tyler leaned away from her slightly, like he wasn't sure if he should be associated with any of this. Is she lying? He asked my parents. Mom sobbed. Dad didn't look up. That was enough. Tyler pushed back his chair and stood. You told me the house was paid off. You said we'd have a clean start. Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. You expect me, he said, voice trembling between anger and disbelief, to start a life on a sinking ship, Tyler. Please. He shook his head. I'm not marrying into this. The room gasped collectively as he walked out past the turkey, past my stunned parents, out the front door without looking back. Jenna's legs gave out. She dropped into her chair, hands shaking mascara smudging down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. This isn't my fault, she whispered. I didn't know. I know, I said, quietly. Dad slammed his palm onto the table. You ruined everything. I stared at him. No, you ruined everything the minute you tried to hand your debt to your children like it was an inheritance. You're tearing this family apart, Mom sobbed. It was already broken, I said. I'm just refusing to keep sweeping the pieces under the rug. A murmur rippled among the relatives' agreement, disappointment judgment, the kind that stings more because it comes from witnesses who saw everything. My grandmother stood slowly, using the table for balance. Her voice, though thin, carried more authority than anyone else's. I taught you better than this, she said to my father. Your daughters are not lifeboats for you to climb into. Dad shrank. Mom wept harder. Jenna finally looked up at me, eyes hollow. What do I do now? The question hit deeper than she meant. Not because I had the answer, but because she was finally asking the right person, not the parents who built her illusions, but the sister they'd pushed aside. Before I could speak, someone knocked on the door. Hard. Every head turned. The knock came again louder. Dad frowned. The door opened and a woman stepped inside. Plain suit, badge clipped to her belt, calm, unreadable expression. "Mr. and Mrs. Nolan," she asked. "I need to speak with you regarding your mortgage records." The room erupted again, this time in a wave of disbelief. Mom nearly collapsed. Dad went white. Jenna grabbed the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't move. I just sat there breathing slowly, watching the truth finally land where it belonged. "Why is she here?" Dad whispered, voice cracking. The investigator didn't blink. "We received a report of potential financial misconduct. I have a few questions." You could have heard a pin drop. Not one person cheered now. "Emily," Mom sobbed. "Tell her you misunderstood, please." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was only beginning to unravel. When the investigator stepped into the house, everything that had held my parents together finally snapped. She asked calm, measured questions about payments, overdue, notices, the second mortgage, and each answer they avoided made the room feel smaller. Relatives drifted away from them like they were stepping back from a fire. Jenna sat motionless, her hands shaking in her lap. She wasn't angry anymore, just emptied out like someone had drained the color from her. My grandmother stood behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder, steady and silent. When the investigator left with the documents, the house fell into a heavy quiet. Mom tried reaching for me. Dad muttered that I'd embarrassed them. Neither apology nor blame landed. I picked up my coat. Jenna whispered, "Don't go. I'll still be here," I told her. "Just not for their lies anymore." In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My parents were forced to confront what they'd built layer after layer of secrecy, excuses, and debt. The house went up for sale. They moved into a small apartment across the city, quieter than they'd ever been. No more grand announcements, no more golden child illusions. Jenna started therapy. She called me often sometimes, to cry sometimes, just to sit in silence on the phone. She told me she finally understood why I stopped letting our parents speak for me. As for me, I learned something I should have known years ago. Telling the truth isn't betrayal. Hiding it is. And families built on denial always collapse eventually. If you've ever had to stand alone at a table full of people who claim to love you, tell me where you're listening from. And after hearing my story, what would you have done?